Continuing this summer series as we come into the church's anniversary at the end of the summer, at the end of the month, on July 21st, kind of picking up the theme that we've been walking in all season, all year, which is serve God, serve others. And so a few weeks ago we talked about kind of reintroducing the theme of the importance of serving God and serving others. And then last week got a chance to hear the testimonies, the witness of those who had partnered with Serve Noblesville, and the stories that came out of that. And this week I want to talk about why. Serve God, serve others, but why? Why does it matter? And this digs a little bit deeper into kind of what I mentioned last week of it's very easy for us to get legalistic when it comes to serving others. And we can do serving others just as something that we check off our list. I volunteered at a food bank. I volunteered with this opportunity to benefit other people, and it can just become that thing that we just check off our list. It was on my calendar. I did it, and I'm done. But I don't think that's what Jesus is talking about when he invites us into the Spirit in John 13, where he washes the disciples' feet and he says, do this. The way that I've done this, the way that you've seen me do this, you should go and be doing this also. He's not specifically talking about actually going out and washing people's feet. It's too small, right? It's too limited. He's talking about the character, the posture that comes in being able to do that within a culture and a context. One, in his context in John 13, it would be one where that is the person of a servant, someone who was not seen with much regard in the culture or the civilization, which is why Peter argues with him on this, that I don't want you to just wash my feet, I want you to wash all of me. If the Messiah is washing body parts, is washing selves, wash all of me, and Jesus says, I don't need to wash all of you, I only need to wash part of you. Right? I don't need to do everything because you've done some of the work, you've done some of the cleansing. And so Jesus is very clear that when we do this, there's a mentality, there's a character, there's a spirit that comes in our serving that's internal. It's not just the external act of doing this thing, but the internal work of doing this as well. And that's why I want to pick up today of why should we serve others? Why is that the posture of Christ? And it's so key for us because at Faith, that's how we do all of our ministries. Where most formation and most discipleship in most churches starts in a classroom. It starts with a study. It starts with joining a group to walk through a lesson or something like that. For Faith, our first step is not in a classroom, but it's actually in service. It's picking up the towel and washing the feet. And so we believe discipleship starts there because in serving, it puts us naturally in the posture, in the position where God can work with us and work through us as we offer ourselves for one another. And so I want to talk about this as why this is so key for us. And the text I want to use today is Luke 18. Luke, when Luke shares parables, he doesn't just share a parable. He usually shares 2 or 3 parables at a time, one after the other, kind of bing, bang, boom, kind of knocks them out. And the idea is that he's sharing kind of different ways that you can look at something. He's kind of turning, if you will, he's turning the diamond so that you can see it through a different lens. And so this is the case in Luke 18. He's just kind of come through. Luke 15, we have the parable of the lost. We have the lost sheep. We have the lost coin, the lost son. He then goes into the parable of a shrewd manager, and he talks about the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and so he's talking about kind of this entitlement. 17, he comes into talking about what it looks like to live out forgiveness in our faith. He talks about the importance of the 10 healed of leprosy, and there's only one who comes back to offer thanks for that. And then he talks about this coming of the kingdom, this thing that takes a certain amount of perspective, and you've got to look at it in this different way of this kingdom coming. And then he goes into these 3 parables in 18. He starts with the parable of the persistent woman, this widow, this woman who just doesn't give up for the sake of getting healing from Christ. He gets then into the parable that I want to talk about today, which is the parable of the tax Pharisee and the tax collector. And it says this, and Jesus told this story of someone who had great confidence in their own righteousness and scorned everyone else. Two men went to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, the other was a despised tax collector. And the Pharisee stood by himself and he prayed the prayers. I thank you, God, that I am not like other people, that I'm not like cheaters, that I'm not like sinners, that I'm not like adulterers. I'm certainly not like the tax collector in the corner. I fast twice a week and I give you 1/10 of my income. But the tax collector, he stood at a distance and dared not even lift his eyes to the heavens as he prayed. And instead, he beat his chest in sorrow, saying, "Oh God, be merciful to me, for I am a sinner." And Jesus responds, "I tell you, this sinner, not the Pharisee, he returned home justified before God. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." So serve God and serve others, but why? Well, because serving others is not the purpose. If it was, it'd be easy, right? It'd just be a matter of filling our spare time, our free time with opportunities to serve. But again, Jesus is actually showing us there's an intentionality that comes with service, so that it creates in us a position, a mindset, a character that is in line with what the kingdom looks like. When we lived in Ohio, we lived on a street, not on the street, but our house was on a street. I guess that's where houses sit, on streets. Let me start over. When we lived in Ohio, we had a couple of Mormons that came to visit us at our house. And if you've been met by them, they have their name tags, they elder, and then their name, whatever that is. And if you're not familiar with the way that their system works, they're sent out usually as college-age students. It's kind of their gap year after high school, where they're sent out to serve the church and serve in the mission field. And so they're always paired up. There's usually an older elder and an apprentice elder. And they serve usually for about 3 years. And it's just a basic, simple rotation. That after 18 months, the older one rotates off and the new one comes in, and they get positioned throughout the world. Different places, usually not in their home state. So they can be sent to, the kid in Connecticut can be sent to the mission field in Hawaii. That's a lucky kid. Where the kid in Hawaii gets sent to South Dakota. Poor sap, right? So they rotate like that, and it's usually the more nuanced elder who helps provide the mentoring and the training to the younger one, shows them the ropes after they've gone through a schooling that shows them how to work and exist within the mission field. And so they come around, and it's usually the senior elder of the pair that does most of the talking and leads the conversation in this. It's very organized, it's very intentional, they're trained extremely well in doing this. And I'd say they're effective in a sense, and that they're knowing what they do and how to go about doing it. And so these two young men showed up at my house, and they were ready to witness to me and to share. And I would say that most of the time these young men and women they've begun to change their model, where they're not just interested in proselytizing, but they're actually interested now in trying to connect with the community. And so they offer themselves to serve, to volunteers. There's something we can help you with around the house. But this wasn't the case when they came to us. And so they came, they met me on a Thursday, which was my day off at the time. And so I welcomed them, I received them, I brought them in. We sat on the couch, I served them drinks, and I let them go through their spiel. One, because I was curious to kind of hear how they would shape it, but also to see where the conversation went and to see where it would go. And it went rather well. But they continued to come back. I told them, this is my day off. I'm usually home working around the house or relaxing. You're welcome to come by any Thursday and visit. And they did. It was pretty common that about once a month I would receive the elders. They would come, I would welcome them in, we would talk and have conversation. At the time, after a couple of years, the youngest elder had moved to the oldest elder position, the place of mentoring, and then he got his new apprentice, his elder with a new assignment who came in, and I remember the first time they came to the house. They came in, we went to the living room, we sat down, I got them drinks, and almost as soon as I sat, the younger elder, as if he was a firework on the 4th of July, he was just waiting to explode, where he starts into his talk, the thing that he'd been trained to do, the reason why he was here, the purpose for his mission. And he gets about a sentence in, and the older elder reaches over and puts his hand on his shoulder, and he said, "Not here. This isn't needed here." And he says, "We know him. This is a friend." And he turned back to me and he picked up a conversation that we'd had over the past previous weeks on actually agape love, a term that he'd never heard of before, and yet is prevalent throughout Scripture as this unconditional love, which the position that God offers us. At that point, the purpose for me, the purpose for this older elder, the purpose changed in service. This wasn't someone to win over. This wasn't someone to convince. This wasn't someone to get on our side. There was no agenda in the service, but in being in presence with one another, to be in the present moment, to share in life experience. And the older elder had learned this over time, that there was something that was more valuable than a pitch, more valuable even than a testimony of their faith, but in being present and listening and engaging and sharing in that moment. And so the purpose changes. And I'd say it's often the problem that's also present in most churches today. That when we think about evangelism, when we think about sharing our faith, when we think about fulfilling the Great Commission, we go out with this purpose to share the Great Commission, and in that we kind of put love and everything that love represents on the shelf. And that doesn't become the driving force in the way that we share the message of Christ in our life. Because we leave out patience and kindness and gentleness and listening and understanding and hearing where the other person is before we actually offer them anything that we may have to offer, which in reality is much more like the second person, that I am a sinner. And it's only by God's grace that I have a story to share. And so the purpose matters. We serve because the purpose matters. We have to understand what that purpose is. Most of us, we operate with life with a purpose. Some of us have it defined. We know what that is. Some of us don't. We just kind of go through life, have a job, maintain a job, take care of our family, take care of our kids, have some enjoyment, have some fun along the ways. And so purpose is out there. Some people get very specific in what their purpose is. It comes down to they're very detailed in the way they spend their time, the way they spend their money, the relationships they have. But purpose matters. Being able to identify that matters. And so if you come and you say something to the effect of, well, my purpose in life is, as a man of the house, is to protect my family. Or my purpose in life is for my kids to be happy. Those purposes don't have roots. Because those purposes are beyond your control. I can only go so far in saying I'm going to protect my family, because there's only so much that I can control. And so beyond that, then, I'm left to all levels of uncertainty that create for me a purpose that can be destroyed. If I want to be happy, there's too many factors that can come into creating happiness. If I understand happiness as the response to doing things that are pleasurable, well, if life doesn't afford me a position or a place where I can do things of pleasure, then my happiness and my purpose is not destroyed. But if I want to create art, well, there's a lot you can control there. art has this untangible reality to it. It can come in the form of expression, of beauty, of truth, of grace, pain. And that art kind of has this fluidity. It comes out in the relationship. It comes out in the conversation. It comes out in the engagement. And so art becomes this kind of wonderful, mysterious thing as you create it. Or if we say things like we say in the church, well, I want to love the Lord with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my mind, and with all my strength. Well, good. But then you got to learn how to do that. You got to learn what it takes to harness the energy and the power of your heart and your mind and your soul and your strength. That doesn't just happen because you voice it and you say it. If I want to get in better shape, I don't just get to say that, but I actually have to put the plan into practice. I need to train my diet. I need to train my physical self. I need to train my thoughts, my mind, because the next morning when I get up at 7 a.m. and I'm supposed to meet the trainer at the gym, my mind's going to say, yeah, but this bed feels really comfortable. And you had a long day yesterday, and wouldn't it be nice to rest a little bit more? Part of staying healthy is resting. Oh, you're right. I'll turn the alarm off and I'll roll back over and I'll go back to sleep. But we have to train ourselves. We have to be intentional with this. And so when we think about what the purpose is, we have to make sure that the purpose makes sense. We have to make sure that the purpose has a level of control that it can actually be achieved. And for the things that we can't control, that we make sure that we're willing to surrender to the unknown. And so in our faith, if we want to foster and create and develop our faith, we have to do it in a way that the unknown, the uncertainty, is that training ground that God's going to work through us, which is also that purpose of serving. When I serve, I don't know who I'm going to serve with. I don't know what that relationship of serving is going to be like. It may be disadvantageous to me. It may be not planned well. It may be far asking and far reaching. So I have to be defined in doing that. I have to be flexible in doing that. I have to be willing to respond in love and the grace and the mercy that Christ is calling us to in the kingdom. In order to do that, I have to understand that part of the purpose of serving is to be able to be aware. To recognize things in your own conscience, to recognize the reality of your physical sense and your physical being, to be able to learn how to love better. Case in point, this last Tuesday, we were supposed to have some vacation time this week. We were going to leave last Sunday and be gone until Wednesday night, and circumstances didn't play out that way, that we ended up just sticking around town. We needed to be at home and around. And because of just situations, then I chose to work and to engage with some things. Tuesday, we had planned to do something as a family. And we chose kind of last minute to go up to Lake Michigan and try out Indiana Dunes. I wanted to go down to Kentucky and do the Red River Gorge and do some kayaking and check out some caves and some hiking, but I lost. And so we went up to Lake Michigan. And the day was beautiful. The sand was nice and hot. We've never been up there before, and so it was taking all that in. And I wish I could say that it was a great day, but it wasn't a great day, at least not for 20% of my family. 4 out of the 5 members of my family enjoyed the day. They enjoyed the water, they enjoyed the sand, they enjoyed the sunshine, they enjoyed hiking the dunes. 1 out of 5 people in my family did not. And it frustrated me because I wanted to enjoy my time with my family. I wanted to enjoy the time away. I wanted to enjoy the time in the water. Water is refreshing to me. It relaxes me. When I'm swimming or enjoying myself in water, it's just, the stress just kind of washes out of my pore and out of my existence. And after completing the week of Serve Noblesville, I knew I needed that. So I began to get frustrated with the fact that I couldn't settle. I couldn't enjoy the day. Everything kind of was just this thing of angst and frustration and tension and anxiety that began to well up in me. And at some point in the day, after being there for about 90 minutes, I just walked away. I walked out to the parking lot. There were some picnic tables under some trees, and I went and I sat there. Until Kimmy knew I was agitated. You know, these family dynamics, you can feel it happening, right? Two magnets with the same poles pushing against each other. This is what was happening that morning. And so I bit my tongue, I didn't want to steal the day from them. Trying to convince myself, my mind, to just flip the switch and get over it. So I went out to the parking lot and I separated myself and I sat under the tree and thankfully there was enough breeze there. Otherwise I think I'd have been like Jonah on the hill, just fuming and growing more furious and waiting for some death and destruction to happen to wrap the trip up so we could go back home. But thankfully there was a breeze, and so it allowed me to cool down a little bit, and there I just began to sit in solitude and to sit and meditate and sit and pray. And I quickly began to realize that my issue, as I thought about this, what is the source of my frustration? Why is it that I can't go out and serve my family? Why can't I go and be the lighthearted, playful self that I usually am in these experiences? Why? What's keeping me from doing this? And as I sat there and I prayed and I meditated on it, I realized I was done with people. After a week served Noblesville and all that went into that, I didn't want to be in a crowd of people. I also didn't want expectations. My family didn't really place expectations on me. Maybe they did, I don't know. They didn't voice it if they did. But I had expectations. That I'd be able to lighten up, that I'd be able to get out in the water and throw the frisbee and throw the ball, and that I'd be able to enjoy myself and relax. And when I couldn't do that, then that just put more pressure on me, and it just didn't work. And I tried, and it failed, and it just made me more anxious. And the more I sat there, the more I just realized I needed rest. I needed to be away. And while I have this idea, this purpose of being able to serve my family, to be able to be fully present with them when we have these moments to be away, where we're not interrupted by phone calls, where I'm not interrupted to go be with someone or at a meeting or something else, I try to make sure I protect this, and yet I was the one who was pulling myself away from this situation. And it just frustrated me to no end. And in service, we realize that we have to be able to answer the places where we're the sinner, the places where we fail, the places where we're limited, the places where we don't have enough or we aren't enough or we can't be enough. And that our mental power and our physical power and our spiritual power, we can't just muscle through those limitations because the soul isn't designed that way. The soul needed rest. My mind needed rest. My body needed rest. While I wanted to be there with my family, I was unable to be there. I didn't have it in me. I didn't have it among me, and there was no amount of desire in that was going to change that. And in purpose, we have to realize, in service, we have to realize that sometimes our purpose has to come after that simple statement where Jesus says, when you're tired and you're weary, come to me, for my yoke is light. That in the Western culture, we convince ourselves that we aren't in need. We don't need served. We're strong, we're independent, we're self-made. And these are lies of the Western culture. These are narratives that we teach ourselves very early on that we can muscle through it. And the reality is no, you can't. But none of us are self-made. Somewhere there's been an influence, there's been a community, there's been some sort of outside source that has been to you. That you're not independent in this, that it requires a network of relationships to move you forward and move you on in life. And the reality is that sometimes you are, we are, I am deficient. And it's okay to admit that. It's okay to realize that. And so service becomes this thing, not only that I do for others, but sometimes I have to receive from others. And we're the worst at receiving service to others, right? I'm not a charity case. I can do this. I can figure it out. I don't want people in my business. I'm a private person. Whatever the excuses, whatever the reasons, whatever facade that we have put up around us, it only keeps people from actually being Christ to us. Let me say that again. When we can't accept the service of others, we limit people from being Christ to us. Just as Peter did, to Christ himself, nonetheless. So we have to understand the purpose of serving is to be aware, to grow in consciousness, to grow in our ability to be able to do love better. And second, we have to be able to create meaning. It's easy for me, for those who've studied Enneagram here in the workshops that we've done or in the Apprentice series, this way of understanding the way that we're energized. I'm a 2, which means naturally it is my natural self and sense to serve others, to be selfless for the sake and the benefit of others. That's not to toot my own horn. That just is the way I operate. I get energy from doing that. I get relaxation from doing that. But if I seek to be validated because of that, if my worth comes from that, then I'm doing service at the wrong level, with the wrong reason, for the wrong intention. And so we have to understand the meaning that comes there. We can't seek to be validated in our service. We can't say, hey, look at me. Look at what I'm doing. Look at how I'm volunteering. Look at how many hours I gave. And we do this, right? We can do this on our social media. We can do this among our friends. Let me tell you about the mission trip I went on, and let me tell you about all the needy people that I helped. Or we believe that in our service we're going to fix them. We're going to straighten them out. We're going to rescue them from their situation as if we are the experts, or better yet, the Messiah. And as I said before, everyone needs to be served in some way. You, right now, you need to be served in some way. There's something that someone else needs to be able to pour into you. And if you're reticent to that, if you're like, not me, I don't need that. Yes, that's exactly where it needs to start, right? That you now have become just exactly the parables that Jesus is talking about. You're now the rich man who can't pass through the gates of the kingdom, because service is a two-way street. And third, the meaning that we create is we understand that in serving and in life in general, there's a choice, that there is pain and there is suffering, and one of those we can choose to live with. We can accept pain because it's the reality. The story of Scriptures, the story of faith shows us pain is the reality that comes in for a world that is run by the undercurrents of sin being present. But in that, we don't have to suffer. You need another example of that? Look at the cross. The pain that was endured by Christ is evident. Go read a journal by a doctor that talks about what the crucifixion process looks like and the pain and the physical agony that Jesus would have gone through in that. But in that, there is no suffering by Christ. He doesn't whine, he doesn't complain, he doesn't call it quits. Instead, what he does is from the cross, he utters 7 prayers, one of which was, "Forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they're doing." And so in his service to us, at the place of ultimate pain that a human could endure, he offered us the best exercise of what love can look like. Could you and I do better No. And so in serving, we get this clarity of sense. We get this clarity of self, of who we are and what drives us and what motivates us. It becomes this mirror that we get a look at in serving others that shows us who we really are. If we don't look in this mirror while serving, then it becomes this point of validation or this medal of honor that we get a hold and make for ourselves. But in this mirror, we begin to see who we are. We become learners. And if we're in this church and if we're a part of the group of people who call themselves Christians or those who are following Christ, then we also call ourselves disciples. So the question is, are you a disciple? Well, if you're a follower of Christ, you have to be a disciple. And if you're a disciple, then you have to be a learner, because that's the very basic definition of what it means to be a disciple. To be a learner, to be an apprentice, to be one who is gaining wisdom and insights and awareness, both from the master teacher, the rabbi, the Messiah, but also from the Spirit that works within us, but also from ourselves as we become in tune with who we are, and more importantly, how we are. Which is why Jesus lays out that serving others is the key point of focus for his discipleship. That if you call me teacher, if you call me rabbi, and you're right in doing so, then you should go and do likewise. Because when you're serving others, you're going to learn about yourself. You're going to learn about others. You're going to learn how the kingdom works. And that this goes for all people. It goes for our enemies. It goes for those we love. It goes for those that we don't know, those who we find annoying. In fact, I stumbled across a quote as I was putting together my notes for this. It said, "You can't actually comprehend the deepest love God has for you until you realize that the love he has for you is also for the person that you most despise." You can't understand the depth of the love that God has for you until you realize that he also has that love for the person or persons that you most despise. So I can't hook my fate of service to the people that I go and serve to. Because the reality is that the people that I go and serve, they may or they may not develop. The people I serve may go down any number of paths that I don't want to share with them. In serving others, it may be foolishness. Because there may be times where in my service, I may do more harm than I do good. And those I serve may live a loving and aware life, or they may not. They may grow selfish, conceited, and smaller in my service. But in serving others, I have to control myself, my own folly, my own limitations, my own urges to help for the sake of being validated or to rescue, and to let that sink in. When I've taken teams from Anderson University down to Jamaica, and other teams as well, it's not uncommon, there or in other places, to hear the response that I've said and others have said as well, that I feel like I was receiving more of a blessing than the blessing that I brought. And I think there's some truth and reality to that. But I had one trip to Jamaica where at the end of the trip, the collective voice group was not one of being blessed by the end of the week. They were actually wrecked by the end of the week. They recognized that there were good things that they'd seen, that the beauty of the culture and the people and the food was certainly present. But this group was different. They operated on a different level than I'd worked with other groups in the past from Anderson and in general. Their question at the end of the trip was, how do I leave here and not let this trip haunt me. Because what do I really have to offer them? I can leave here and I go back to the comforts and the luxuries of my home. I go back and I'm going to have a pantry that's full of food. I'm going to have the comforts of my bathroom, the comforts of my bed, the comforts of a culture and society that take care of me. And these people are still trapped in the poverty and the oppression and the frustrations of their life. Because I came down for 10 to 12 days. And it was really different. It was really eye-opening for me as I listened to their frustration at the end of this trip and kind of their angst of this. This angst as they were crying out for justice, as they were crying out to understand, as they were leaving Jamaica actually with more questions in their mind than answers from the experience that they had. And what I realize is that when we actually serve others in that posture of Christ, it should leave us disturbed. Because in serving others, we're faced with the ways that we are inadequate, that the systems around us are inadequate. The ways that we go about doing it when we seek to be validated, seek to be made happy, seek to be seen in doing so, those tend to brush over the character and the realities of Christ, of being patient, of being long-suffering, of enduring with them in their hardship. And if we don't create that character, if we don't create that willingness as Christ showed us, if it just becomes this happy-go-lucky view of serving others, do we go deep enough to actually serve the needs of those we're showing up to meet? Are we willing to actually show the love to those who we maybe despise, so that we can truly see what it looks like to love as Christ did? The tax collector stood at a distance, and he dared not even lift his eyes to heaven as he prayed. Instead, he beat his chest in sorrow, and he said, "Oh God, be merciful to me, for I am a sinner." So may we be justified in our faith for not recognizing how righteous we are, but how righteous God makes us by accepting us as sinners, and that we may be humbled so that Christ may. Amen. If you are a volunteer for VBS, would you stand? Great. These are those that are here this morning that will be volunteering this week and serving the children and the families from the community that will be coming in. Volunteers, those who are standing, would you point people who are sitting? Please, go ahead, point at them. In a loving, generous way, point at them. All right, if you're being pointed at, you have an opportunity to serve this week as well. Your job this week is to make sure that you are praying for and encouraging those who are standing. They are doing their work by following their passions and their giftedness to be here. It is the rest of our work to make sure that we're lifting them in prayer and encouragement as they are the hands and feet of Christ for those kids and families. And then it's also your job on Thursday to come and join us as we wrap up the week and celebrate Thursday evening with a dinner with those children and with those families. That'll be at the same time, 6:30 to 8. And so know that just because you are not here volunteering, you have a role and a place to serve for VBS. And now with that, would everybody please stand so I can give you a blessing as you head into your week. May you serve, and as you serve, may the Spirit lead you to grow in your awareness and your understanding of yourself, and the awareness and the understanding of others, and the awareness and understanding of God, that you may grow deeper in your ability to love, especially in the moments that are most difficult. May God be with you. Go in God's peace.